Hi, I'm Zephyr Kane. I used to believe that marriage meant becoming part of a real family, that trust was something you built through years of shared meals and late-night conversations. I thought my in-laws genuinely cared about me when they asked to borrow my credit card for groceries during a rough patch. Then I discovered they had used my pristine credit score and banking access to finance a brand new BMW X7 M50i without telling me. When I confronted them, they didn't apologize. They told me I was overreacting, that family helps family, and that I should be grateful they trusted me enough to include me in their financial decisions. So I smiled, nodded, and pretended everything was fine. But behind that smile, I was already planning how to teach them the true cost of betrayal. What they didn't realize was that I had spent 3 years meticulously documenting every loan, every favor, every dollar that flowed from my accounts to theirs. And when I finally struck back, they never saw it coming. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The morning everything changed started like any other Wednesday in Portland. Rain tapped against my apartment windows in that gentle, persistent way that makes you want to stay in bed forever. I was nursing my second cup of coffee, scrolling through emails before heading to my job at the tech startup downtown, when my phone rang. The caller ID showed Elena's name, my wife of 4 years, and something in my chest tightened. She never called this early. "Hey babe," I answered, trying to keep my voice light. "Everything okay?" "Oh Zeph," she sighed, and I could hear that familiar strain that meant her parents were involved in whatever was about to unfold. "I'm so sorry to bother you, but Mom and Dad are in a bit of a situation." Elena's parents, Marcus and Patricia Voss, were the kind of people who treated financial emergencies like weather patterns, inevitable and beyond their control. In the 3 years since Elena and I had gotten married, I'd watched them cycle through job losses, medical bills, and investment schemes gone wrong with the resigned acceptance of people who had never learned to plan beyond next week. "What kind of situation?" I asked, though I already knew where this was heading. "Their car finally died," Elena explained. "The transmission went completely, and the repair shop says it would cost more to fix than the car is worth. Dad's got that new job starting Monday, remember? The one with the construction company in Beaverton. He can't get there without reliable transportation." I set my coffee down and rubbed my temples. Marcus had been unemployed for 6 months, cycling through various get-rich-quick schemes and part-time gigs, while Patricia worked double shifts at the nursing home to keep them afloat. The new job was legitimate, stable, the kind of opportunity Marcus couldn't afford to lose because of transportation issues. "How much do they need?" I asked, though I was already calculating my available credit and wondering how long it would take them to pay me back this time. "Well, that's the thing," Elena said, her voice getting smaller. "They don't need cash exactly. They need someone with good credit to co-sign for a car loan. Just temporarily, you know, until Dad gets a few paychecks and can refinance it under his own name." I walked to my living room window and watched the rain create rivers down the glass. Co-signing felt different from lending cash, more permanent, more risky. But Elena's parents had always been good to me, welcoming me into their chaotic family dinners and treating me like the son they'd never had. Marcus had spent an entire weekend helping me move into this apartment, refusing to accept payment for his time. "What kind of car are they looking at?" I asked. "Nothing fancy," Elena said quickly. "Just something reliable." Dad found a used sedan at one of those certified pre-owned lots. The payments would be around $400 a month, and like I said, it's just until he can get his credit straightened out. $400 a month was manageable, especially if it was temporary. And if it meant Marcus could keep this job and get his family back on stable ground, it seemed like a reasonable risk. "Okay," I said. "I can do that." The relief in Elena's voice was palpable. "Really? Oh Zeph, thank you so much. They're going to be so grateful." Dad was worried he'd have to turn down the job. After we hung up, I spent the rest of the morning feeling good about my decision. This was what family did for each other. Elena and I were planning to start having kids in the next few years, and I wanted her parents to be part of that future. Building trust and showing them I was reliable felt like an investment in all of our relationships. That afternoon, Marcus called me directly. His voice was thick with emotion when he thanked me for stepping up. "Zeph, I want you to know this means everything to us," he said. "Patricia was crying when Elena told her you agreed to help. We won't forget this, son." Son, that word hit me harder than it should have. My own father had died when I was 12, and my relationship with my stepfather had always been cordial but distant. Having Marcus call me son felt like being welcomed into something I'd been missing most of my life. "Don't worry about it," I told him. "Family takes care of family." The next morning, I met Marcus and Patricia at Premier Auto Solutions, a gleaming dealership on the east side of town that specialized in certified pre-owned luxury vehicles. The moment we walked through the glass doors, I felt a flutter of unease. This wasn't the modest used car lot I'd been expecting. "Marcus," I said quietly as we approached the sales desk, "I thought we were looking at something basic." He clapped me on the shoulder with that easy confidence that had always made me want to trust him. "We are, son." But Patricia did some research and found out that certified pre-owned luxury cars actually hold their value better than regular used cars. Better investment all around. A salesman named Derek approached us with the kind of smile that costs extra. He was young, maybe early 30s, with perfectly styled hair and a suit that probably cost more than most people's rent. "Mr. Voss," he said, extending his hand to Marcus, "I've got that X7 pulled around front for you to take a look at." X7, my stomach dropped. "What's an X7?" I asked. Derek's smile widened. "BMW X7 M50i. Beautiful vehicle, fully loaded, low mileage, certified pre-owned warranty. Your father-in-law has excellent taste." I felt the blood drain from my face. BMW. This wasn't a modest sedan. This was a luxury SUV that probably cost more than my annual salary. "Marcus," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "can I talk to you for a minute?" But Derek was already leading us outside, chattering about horsepower and premium interior features. The vehicle sitting in the lot was magnificent, I had to admit. Deep blue metallic paint that seemed to shift colors in the light, chrome accents gleaming, interior leather that looked softer than my couch. It was the kind of car I'd admired from a distance but never imagined owning. "Isn't she beautiful?" Patricia said, running her hand along the hood. "And Derek says with Zephyr's excellent credit, we can get a really good interest rate." "How much does this cost?" I asked Derek directly. "Well, with the certified pre-owned warranty and current incentives, we're looking at $89,995, he said, like he was announcing the weather. "But with excellent credit, monthly payments would only be around $1,200, not $400. $1,200 a month for 6 years. I felt like I was going to be sick. "That's not what we discussed," I said to Marcus. "Elena said $400 a month for something basic." Marcus looked genuinely confused. "Son, I never said $400. That wouldn't even cover insurance on a decent vehicle. Patricia must have miscommunicated with Elena." Patricia nodded earnestly. "I'm so sorry for the confusion, Zephyr. I thought Elena understood we were looking at something substantial. Marcus needs a vehicle that projects success for his new position. Image matters in construction management." I stood there in the parking lot, rain beginning to fall again, staring at a car that cost more than most people's houses. Everything in my gut screamed that this was wrong, that I should walk away, that this was exactly the kind of decision that destroyed relationships and credit scores. But Marcus was looking at me with such hope, and Patricia was already explaining to Derek about the urgency of the Monday start date, and Elena had been so relieved when I agreed to help. The salesman was pulling out paperwork and talking about how quickly they could process everything with my credit score. "I need to think about this," I said. Derek nodded understandingly.
Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now, back to the story.
Of course, this is a big decision, but I should mention that we have another buyer interested in this exact vehicle. If you want to secure it, we'd need to move forward today. The pressure was gentle but unmistakable. Marcus was scheduled to start his new job in 4 days. They needed transportation. I had said I would help, and despite the sticker shock, $1,200 a month wasn't impossible for me to manage, especially if it really was temporary. "How long would the loan be in my name?" I asked Marcus. "Just until I can get established in the new position," he assured me. 6 months at most. Once I have some pay stubs and can show stable income, my credit union said they'd be happy to refinance it under my name. 6 months of $1,200 payments. I could handle that. And if it meant Marcus could succeed in his new job and eventually take over the payments, it would be worth the temporary strain. "Okay," I said finally. "Let's do it." The paperwork process took 3 hours. Derek walked me through credit applications, loan documents, insurance requirements, and registration forms. My signature went on page after page of documents I barely had time to read properly. Patricia made coffee runs and Marcus called his new employer to confirm his Monday start date. When it was finally over, Derek handed Marcus the keys with a ceremonial flourish. "Congratulations on your beautiful new vehicle," he said. "Zephyr, you're a good son-in-law. Not many people would step up like this." Driving home that evening, I felt a complex mix of anxiety and satisfaction. The anxiety was obvious. I'd just committed to nearly $1,500 in monthly expenses between the car payment and insurance. But the satisfaction ran deeper. Marcus had hugged me in the dealership parking lot, his eyes actually wet with tears. Patricia had promised to cook my favorite meal every Sunday for as long as the loan was in my name. Even Elena, when I called to tell her everything was finalized, sounded amazed by my generosity. $1,200 a month, she said. "Zeph, are you sure you can afford that?" "It's temporary," I assured her. "And your dad really needed something reliable." "I can't believe they ended up with a BMW," she laughed. "Mom's going to feel like a queen driving that thing." That night I updated my budget spreadsheet and moved some money around to accommodate the new expense. It would be tight, but manageable. I'd have to skip the vacation I'd been planning and maybe eat out less often, but these were small sacrifices for family. 3 weeks later, I was scrolling through Instagram during my lunch break when I saw Patricia's latest post. She was standing next to the BMW in what appeared to be a Whole Foods parking lot, bags of organic groceries visible through the back window, smiling broadly at the camera. The caption read, "Blessed to have such abundance in our lives. Marcus's new job is going so well and we're finally able to enjoy some of the finer things. #grateful #blessed living our best life." Something about the post bothered me, though I couldn't quite put my finger on what. Maybe it was the emphasis on abundance and fine things when I was the one making the payments. Maybe it was that she'd posted it during work hours when she was supposed to be at the nursing home. But I pushed the feeling aside. Patricia had worked hard for years while Marcus was unemployed. If she wanted to enjoy a nice car and good groceries for a few months, who was I to judge? The first payment came out of my account automatically on the 15th of the month. $1,237, just as expected. I barely noticed it among my other automatic payments. The second month I happened to be near Marcus's construction site and decided to stop by to see how the new job was going. The site supervisor, a weathered man named Jim, looked confused when I asked about Marcus Voss. "Marcus," he said. "Yeah, he worked here for about 2 weeks. Good worker when he showed up, but he had some kind of family emergency and had to quit. That was maybe 3 weeks ago now." My heart stopped. "He quit?" "Yeah, said his wife was having health problems and he needed to be available for appointments and such. Seemed like a decent guy. We would have worked with him on the schedule, but he said the stress was too much." I drove home in a daze. Marcus had quit the job that was supposed to justify the expensive car, the job that was supposed to provide the income to refinance the loan out of my name. He'd quit 3 weeks ago, which meant he'd been unemployed for most of the time I'd been making payments. That evening I called Elena to ask if she knew about her father's employment situation. "Oh," she said, her voice small. "Yeah, Mom mentioned something about Dad having to leave that job, but I think he found something else, some kind of consulting work." "Consulting work?" "I don't know the details," she admitted. "You know how Dad is about his business dealings. He likes to keep things close to the vest." I knew how Marcus was about his business dealings. They usually involved multi-level marketing schemes, cryptocurrency investments, or other ventures that generated more enthusiasm than income. The next day, I drove to Marcus and Patricia's house unannounced. The BMW was in the driveway, freshly washed and gleaming. Patricia answered the door in a new dress I didn't recognize, her hair professionally styled. "Zephyr," she said, seeming genuinely pleased to see me. "What a nice surprise. Come in, come in. I just made fresh coffee." Their living room had been redecorated since my last visit. New furniture, a large flat-screen TV, art on the walls that looked expensive. Patricia noticed me looking around. "Marcus has been doing so well with his consulting business," she explained. "We finally felt comfortable investing in our home a little bit." "What kind of consulting?" I asked. "Oh, you know Marcus. He's always been brilliant with numbers and business strategy. He's helping some local companies optimize their operations." It sounded impressive but vague, the kind of explanation that meant nothing while sounding like everything. Marcus emerged from what I assumed was a home office, wearing khakis and a polo shirt instead of the work clothes I'd expected. "Zeph," he said, embracing me warmly. "Great to see you, son. How's work treating you?" "Good," I said. "How's the consulting business?" "Fantastic," he said, without hesitation. "Best decision I ever made. leaving that construction gig. The pay is better, the hours are flexible, and I get to use my brain instead of just my back. We sat in their beautiful living room drinking coffee from expensive-looking cups while Marcus described his various consulting projects in terms that sounded legitimate but remained frustratingly non-specific. Patricia showed me photos on her new tablet of a weekend trip they'd taken to the coast, staying at a resort I recognized as particularly luxurious. The BMW's been perfect for road trips, she said. So comfortable, and Marcus loves all the technology features. I left their house feeling confused and vaguely uneasy. Everything Marcus had told me seemed plausible, and they certainly appeared to be doing well. But something felt off about the whole situation. If his consulting business was so successful, why hadn't he mentioned refinancing the car loan? We were approaching the 3-month mark, halfway to the timeline he'd originally given me. That weekend I decided to do a little research. A simple Google search for Marcus Voss and consulting turned up nothing. LinkedIn showed his profile still listed him as unemployed. The Oregon Secretary of State's business registry had no record of any company associated with his name. On impulse I drove past the construction site where he'd briefly worked. Jim, the site supervisor, remembered me. "You're Marcus's son-in-law, right?" he said. "How's he doing?" We heard through the grapevine that his wife's health situation turned out to be nothing serious. His wife's health situation? Yeah, that's why he quit. Said Patricia was having heart problems and needed him home for doctor visits and recovery. We felt bad for the guy. Medical emergencies can destroy a family financially. Patricia's health problems, except Patricia had seemed perfectly healthy when I'd visited, energetic and glowing as she showed off their new purchases and vacation photos. That evening, I sat in my apartment staring at my laptop screen trying to make sense of what I'd learned. Marcus had quit his job after 2 weeks, apparently using Patricia's fictional health crisis as an excuse. He wasn't doing consulting work, despite the elaborate story he'd told me. Yet somehow they were living better than ever, buying furniture and taking vacations and shopping at Whole Foods. I opened my banking app and looked at the automatic payment that had processed just days earlier. $1,237. In 3 months I'd paid nearly $4,000 for a car that Marcus and Patricia were driving while living a lifestyle they clearly couldn't afford. But maybe I was being paranoid. Maybe Marcus really did have consulting work that wasn't easily searchable online. Maybe Patricia had been sick but recovered quickly. Maybe they'd received some money from another source, an inheritance or insurance payout or something else that explained their sudden prosperity. I wanted to believe these explanations because the alternative was too disturbing to contemplate. The alternative was that I was being played, that the people I'd come to think of as surrogate parents were using my credit and my trust to finance a lifestyle upgrade while spinning elaborate lies to cover their tracks. The next month's payment processed on schedule. This time I paid attention to how it felt to see that money leave my account. It felt like being robbed in slow motion. 2 days later, Elena called me at work, her voice tight with stress. "Zeph, I need to ask you something and I need you to be honest with me." My heart started racing. "What's wrong?" "My parents asked me to ask you if you could add them as authorized users on your credit cards, just temporarily for emergencies. They said you'd understand what it was about." I sat back in my office chair staring at the ceiling. "They want access to my credit cards." "I know it sounds weird," Elena said quickly. "But Mom explained that sometimes with Dad's consulting work he needs to make quick purchases for clients and then get reimbursed later. Having access to credit would make those transactions smoother. The consulting work that didn't exist. The clients who weren't real. The reimbursements that would never come." "Elena," I said carefully, "has your dad actually shown you any documentation of this consulting business? Contracts, invoices, anything like that?" There was a pause. "Why would you ask that?" "Because I drove by his old construction site, and the supervisor told me he quit because of your mother's health problems. But when I visited your parents, your mom seemed fine. Better than fine, actually." Another pause, longer this time. "Are you spying on my family?" "I'm trying to understand why I'm making $1,200 car payments for people who seem to be living beyond their means while asking for more access to my finances." The silence stretched so long I wondered if the call had dropped. Finally, Elena spoke, her voice cold in a way I'd never heard before. "I think you're being really unfair right now," she said. "My parents have always been good to you. They've treated you like family, and now you're questioning their integrity because you heard some secondhand gossip." "It's not gossip, Elena." I spoke directly to his former supervisor. "Maybe there was a misunderstanding. Maybe Dad didn't feel comfortable sharing personal details about Mom's health with his employer. Did you consider that? I had considered it. I'd considered every possible innocent explanation, but the evidence was pointing in a direction I didn't want to face. I'm not adding them to my credit cards, I said. Fine, Elena said curtly. I'll tell them you said no. She hung up without saying goodbye. That night I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the conversation, about the coldness in Elena's voice when I'd questioned her parents' story. For the first time since we'd gotten married, I felt like Elena and I were on opposite sides of something important. But maybe I was being unfair. Maybe I was letting paranoia and financial stress make me suspicious of people who genuinely cared about me. Maybe the smart thing to do was to trust the family relationships I'd built and stop looking for problems that might not exist. The next morning I decided to take a different approach. Instead of investigating Marcus and Patricia, I would simply have an honest conversation with them about the timeline for transferring the car loan. It had been almost 4 months since the purchase, longer than the original estimate but not unreasonably so if Marcus's consulting business was still getting established. I called Marcus directly and asked if we could meet for lunch to discuss the car situation. He seemed happy to hear from me and suggested a restaurant downtown that I knew was expensive but agreed to anyway. Marcus was already seated when I arrived, looking relaxed and prosperous in a sport coat I didn't recognize. He stood to embrace me, clapping me on the back with genuine warmth. Zeph, good to see you, son. You look tired. Work keeping you busy? We ordered drinks and made small talk while I worked up the nerve to broach the subject of the car loan. Finally, during a lull in conversation, I dove in. Marcus, I wanted to talk to you about the BMW situation. We're coming up on 4 months now and I was wondering about the timeline for getting it refinanced under your name. Marcus nodded thoughtfully, swirling his whiskey. Right. I appreciate you bringing that up. The truth is, the consulting business has been going even better than I expected, but it's all contract work, you know. Irregular income streams. My credit union wants to see 6 months of consistent deposits before they'll approve a loan that size. 6 months from now, or 6 months total. 6 months total, he said. So we're looking at maybe 2 more months, 3 at the outside. I know it's longer than we originally discussed, but I want to make sure everything's solid before I take on that kind of debt obligation. 2 more months seemed reasonable, especially if it meant the loan would definitely be transferred to his name. I felt some of my anxiety ease. How's the consulting work going? I asked. Elena mentioned you're helping local businesses with operations. Marcus's face lit up. It's been incredible, Zeph. I'm working with 3 different companies right now, helping them streamline their processes, reduce overhead, maximize efficiency. 25 years in construction management gave me a lot of transferable skills I didn't even realize I had. He talked enthusiastically about workflow optimization and cost-benefit analysis, using business terminology that sounded impressive and legitimate. By the time lunch was over, I felt foolish for doubting him. The man across from me was clearly intelligent and knowledgeable, someone who could absolutely succeed as a business consultant. Walking back to my car, I felt lighter than I had in weeks. The car payments would continue for a couple more months, but then the whole situation would be resolved. Marcus would take over the loan, my credit would be clear, and we could all move forward as family. 3 weeks later, I got a call from Derek at Premier Auto Solutions. Mr. Kane, this is Derek from Premier Auto. I hope you're enjoying your BMW. Actually, my father-in-law is the one driving it, I said. Is there a problem with something? Well, that's why I'm calling. We've had some inquiries about extended warranty options and service packages, and I wanted to make sure I was talking to the right person. The vehicle is registered under your name, correct? Yes, but any decisions about warranties or service should go through Marcus Voss. He's the one actually using the car. I understand, but legally any changes to the warranty or service agreements need to be authorized by the registered owner. That's you. Something about his tone made me nervous. What kind of changes are we talking about? Well, Mr. Voss was asking about some aftermarket modifications, custom wheels, performance upgrades, that kind of thing. Normally we'd handle that directly with the owner, but since the registration and loan are in different names, we need your explicit approval. Performance upgrades, custom wheels, on a car that was supposed to be temporary transportation for someone who was supposed to be refinancing it out of my name in a matter of weeks. I don't approve any modifications, I said quickly. No problem, Derek said. I'll let Mr. Voss know. Thanks for your time, Mr. Kane. After Derek hung up, I sat staring at my phone. Marcus had been at the dealership trying to make expensive modifications to a car that was legally mine, a car he was supposed to be preparing to take over ownership of. It didn't make sense unless he wasn't planning to take over ownership at all. That afternoon I did something I'd never done before. I drove to Patricia's workplace, the Sunset Manor nursing home, and asked to speak with her. The receptionist looked confused. Patricia Voss. I'm sorry, but we don't have anyone by that name working here. Are you sure? She's been working here for several years. Double shifts usually. The receptionist checked her computer again. No, I'm sorry. No Patricia Voss in our system. What about Patricia Hoffman? I asked, using Patricia's maiden name. Or maybe she goes by Patty. No, sir. No Patty or Patricia with any of those last names. I thanked her and walked back to my car feeling like the ground was shifting beneath my feet. Patricia didn't work at Sunset Manor. Had never worked at Sunset Manor. Which meant the story about her working double shifts to support the family during Marcus's unemployment was a lie. But if Patricia wasn't working, and Marcus wasn't working, where was their money coming from? How were they paying for new furniture and weekend getaways and organic groceries and expensive dinners? The answer was obvious, but I didn't want to accept it. They were living off my car payments. The $1,200 I was sending to BMW every month was being treated as income, as free money they could use to upgrade their lifestyle while spinning elaborate stories to keep me convinced that their situation was temporary. That evening, I called Elena again. This time I was careful to keep my voice calm and non-accusatory. Hey babe, can I ask you something about your mom's job? Sure. What about it? I was in the area of Sunset Manor today and thought I'd stop by to say hi, but they said she doesn't work there. Elena was quiet for a moment. Maybe you went to the wrong location. I think there are several Sunset facilities in the area. I went to the one she's always talked about, the one on Burnside. The receptionist seemed pretty sure they'd never had a Patricia Voss. Another pause. That's weird. Maybe she's using Dad's last name instead of her maiden name for work. Or maybe there was some kind of computer error. Elena, I said gently, when was the last time you actually saw your mom in her work uniform? Or heard her talk about specific patients or coworkers? The silence stretched longer this time. Are you trying to make some kind of point? I'm trying to understand how your parents are supporting themselves. Your dad quit his construction job after 2 weeks. I can't find any evidence of his consulting business. And now it seems like your mom might not be working either. So what are you saying? Elena's voice was getting that cold edge again. I'm saying I think they're using my car payments as income. I think they've been lying to both of us about their employment situation. That's a pretty serious accusation, Zeph. It's not an accusation, it's a question. A question I think deserves an honest answer. I think you need to talk to them directly, if you have concerns, Elena said. I'm not going to play detective with my own parents. After Elena hung up, I sat in my living room trying to decide what to do next. I could confront Marcus and Patricia directly, but they'd already shown themselves to be skilled at creating plausible explanations for inconsistencies in their stories. I could demand immediate transfer of the car loan, but that might damage my relationship with Elena, who seemed determined to believe her parents were acting in good faith. Or I could do what I'd been trained to do in my work life when faced with incomplete information. I could gather more data. The next morning, I started building a file, not because I wanted to catch Marcus and Patricia in lies, but because I needed to understand the full scope of what was happening, so I could make informed decisions about how to proceed. I printed out bank statements showing every car payment I'd made. I screenshotted Patricia's social media posts documenting their various purchases and activities. I researched Marcus's supposed consulting clients and found no evidence any of them existed. I drove by their house at different times of day and noted which cars were in the driveway, when lights were on, when they seemed to be home versus away. What I discovered was a pattern of deception that went far deeper than I'd imagined. Marcus and Patricia were living entirely off my car payments plus what appeared to be credit purchases on various cards. They had no legitimate income from any source. The consulting business, Patricia's nursing home job, even the story about Marcus's original construction job being a stepping stone to something better. It was all fiction designed to keep me making payments while they lived like lottery winners. But the most disturbing discovery came when I decided to check my credit report, something I should have done months earlier. There, listed among my accounts, was a credit card I'd never opened. A platinum rewards card with a $15,000 limit and a current balance of $14,700. My hands shook as I called the credit card company's customer service line. After navigating through multiple menu options and providing identification information, I was connected to a representative named Sarah. "Yes, Mr. Kane. I see the account here. It was opened 4 months ago. The authorized users are listed as Marcus Voss and Patricia Voss. I never authorized anyone to be added to that account," I said. "In fact, I never even applied for that card. I'm looking at the application now, sir. It shows your signature authorizing both the account opening and the addition of the 2 authorized users. That's impossible. Can you email me a copy of that application? I can send it to the address we have on file. That would be, let me see, 2847 Cedar Ridge Drive. That was Marcus and Patricia's address, not mine." "That's not my address," I said. "My address is 1205 Oak Street, apartment 3B. "I'm sorry, sir, but our records show 2847 Cedar Ridge Drive as both your mailing address and your billing address for this account." I felt like I was drowning. "I need to speak to a supervisor now." The supervisor, a man named Robert, explained the situation with professional sympathy but limited options. Someone had applied for credit in my name using my social security number and employment information, but had provided Marcus and Patricia's address as my residence. All statements and correspondence had been mailed to their house, which is why I'd never seen any evidence of the account. "This appears to be identity theft, Mr. Kane. You'll need to file a police report and submit an affidavit disputing the charges. We can freeze the account immediately to prevent further use." "Yes, freeze it now." "Done. The account is frozen, but I should warn you, sir, that any authorized users may have additional cards tied to this account. They won't be able to make new purchases, but if they attempt to use the cards, it may take several hours for the freeze to take effect across all merchant systems." After hanging up, I sat in my office staring at the email copy of the credit application. There was my name, my social security number, my employment information. But the signature, while similar to mine, wasn't quite right. Someone had forged my signature well enough to fool a credit card company, but not well enough to fool me. Marcus and Patricia had committed identity theft. They had opened credit in my name without my knowledge or consent, used it to fund their lifestyle upgrade, and had been having all correspondence sent to their address so I'd never discover the fraud. This wasn't a family helping family situation that had gotten complicated. This was a deliberate criminal scheme designed to exploit my trust and my credit for their benefit. I spent the rest of that day filing police reports, disputing fraudulent charges, and trying to assess the full scope of the damage to my finances and credit. The BMW, it turned out, was just the beginning. The credit card fraud alone would take months to resolve, and there was no guarantee I'd be able to recover the money that had already been spent. But even more devastating than the financial damage was the emotional betrayal. Marcus and Patricia hadn't just stolen my money. They'd stolen my trust, my sense of family, my belief that the people I cared about me in return. They had looked me in the eyes, called me son, hugged me with apparent genuine warmth, all while systematically defrauding me and planning to continue doing so for as long as I remained naive enough to let them. As I sat in my apartment that evening, surrounded by printed bank statements and police report forms and credit dispute letters, one thing became crystal clear. This wasn't over. Marcus and Patricia had made the mistake of thinking I was just a convenient source of funding, someone too trusting and too eager to please to ever fight back. They were about to learn exactly how wrong they were. The first thing I did was create a detailed timeline, not for revenge, not for justice, but for clarity. I needed to see the full pattern of deception laid out chronologically so I could understand exactly how they'd manipulated me and for how long. I started with a simple spreadsheet on my laptop, 3 columns: date, event, evidence. What began as a few entries quickly grew into a comprehensive record of financial fraud that spanned not just the past 4 months but the entire 3 years since Elena and I had gotten married, February 2022. Marcus asks to borrow $500 for emergency dental work. I write him a check, he promises to pay me back within 2 weeks. Evidence, bank statement showing withdrawn funds, text message promising repayment, never repaid. April 2022. Patricia calls crying, says they're about to lose their apartment because of late rent. I transfer $800 directly to their landlord. She promises to pay me back as soon as Marcus gets his next unemployment check. Evidence, wire transfer receipt, text messages from Patricia, never repaid. June 2022. Marcus says he has a job opportunity but needs professional clothing for interviews. I give him my credit card to buy a suit and dress shoes. The charges total $650. He promises to pay me back after his first paycheck. Evidence, credit card statement showing charges at Men's Warehouse in Nordstrom, never repaid. The entries went on and on, small amounts, always with plausible explanations, always with promises of quick repayment, never followed through. What looked like isolated emergencies when viewed individually revealed themselves as a systematic pattern when compiled together. By the time I finished documenting everything I could remember and verify, the total came to over $18,000 in direct loans and payments, plus the ongoing BMW payments and the fraudulent credit card charges. They hadn't just stolen my money recently, they'd been doing it consistently since the beginning of my relationship with Elena. But what struck me most wasn't the dollar amount. It was the sophistication of their approach. They never asked for large sums that might trigger my suspicion. They always provided emotional context that made saying no seem cruel. They timed their requests carefully, spacing them far enough apart that I wouldn't notice the pattern. And most importantly, they'd cultivated a relationship with me that made questioning their integrity feel like questioning my own character as a family member. The more I studied their methods, the angrier I became. This wasn't desperation or poor financial management. This was a calculated long-term strategy designed to extract as much money from me as possible while keeping me convinced I was helping family members through temporary difficulties. I spent the next 2 days gathering additional evidence. I created fake social media profiles to monitor Marcus and Patricia's online activity without them knowing I was watching. I drove by their house at different times to document their daily routines. I researched property records to see if they owned other assets I wasn't aware of. What I discovered made my blood boil. The weekend trips Patricia had been posting about weren't occasional treats funded by Marcus's consulting work. They were taking expensive vacations almost every month, staying at luxury resorts and eating at 5-star restaurants while I made their car payments and covered their fraudulent credit card bills. The new furniture in their house wasn't modest upgrades. They'd completely redecorated with designer pieces that probably cost more than my annual rent. Patricia's wardrobe had transformed from discount store basics to boutique fashions. Marcus was driving the BMW to golf courses and country clubs I couldn't afford to visit. They weren't just stealing my money, they were using it to live a lifestyle that was entirely beyond their means while presenting themselves to the world as successful and prosperous. But the detail that pushed me over the edge was a photo Patricia had posted from what appeared to be an expensive spa day. She was lying on a massage table with cucumber slices over her eyes, champagne glass in hand, captioned, "Sometimes you just have to treat yourself. Life's too short not to enjoy the finer things." She was treating herself with my money. My car payments were funding her spa days while I was eating ramen noodles and canceling my own plans to accommodate their fake emergencies. That night, I made a decision. I wasn't just going to confront them or demand they stop. I was going to systematically dismantle the entire structure they'd built around exploiting me, and I was going to do it in a way that would prevent them from ever victimizing anyone else. The first step was securing my own finances. I contacted every bank and credit card company I'd ever used and placed fraud alerts on all my accounts. I changed all my online passwords and set up two-factor authentication on everything. I froze my credit reports with all 3 bureaus to prevent any new accounts from being opened without my explicit authorization. Next, I worked with my bank to reverse the automatic payment authorization for the BMW. That required providing documentation of the identity theft which I'd already filed with the police. The bank representative warned me that BMW Financial would likely contact me about the missed payment, but that was exactly what I wanted to happen. The real work began with building a comprehensive evidence file that would support criminal charges against Marcus and Patricia. I printed out every bank statement, every credit report, every social media post, every text message conversation we'd ever had about money. I organized everything chronologically and created summaries that clearly showed the pattern of fraud and deception. I also started researching Oregon's laws regarding identity theft and financial fraud. What I learned was encouraging. Identity theft was a Class C felony carrying potential prison time and mandatory restitution. Financial fraud involving amounts over $10,000 could be prosecuted as a Class B felony with even harsher penalties. Marcus and Patricia had committed multiple felonies, and I had the evidence to prove it. But before involving prosecutors, I wanted to give them one final opportunity to make things right. Not because I felt sorry for them or because I hoped they might actually change, but because I wanted to document their response when confronted with irrefutable evidence of their crimes. I spent an entire weekend crafting a letter that laid out everything I'd discovered, provided copies of the evidence, and offered them a choice: voluntary restitution and cooperation, or criminal prosecution and civil lawsuits. The letter was 10 pages long, professionally formatted and clinically detailed. I didn't express anger or disappointment. I simply presented facts and consequences in the same tone I might use for a business proposal. I printed the letter on high-quality paper, included copies of key evidence documents, and delivered it personally to their house on a Tuesday morning when I knew they'd both be home. Patricia answered the door in a silk robe that probably cost more than my monthly grocery budget. Her face lit up when she saw me. "Zephyr, what a wonderful surprise. Come in, come in. Marcus is just finishing breakfast." I followed her into their beautifully appointed kitchen, where Marcus was reading a newspaper and drinking coffee from a cup that looked like fine china. "Son," he said, standing to embrace me. "Great to see you. How's work treating you?" "I need to talk to both of you about something important," I said, pulling the envelope from my briefcase. "Of course," Patricia said, gesturing toward the dining table. "Can I get you coffee? I just made a fresh pot." "No thank you," I said, sitting down and placing the envelope on the table between us. "I need you both to read this." Marcus picked up the envelope and examined it curiously. "What's this about?" "Just read it," I said. "All of it. Then we'll talk." I watched their faces as they read through the letter together. Patricia's smile faded first, replaced by confusion, then alarm. Marcus frowned, flipped back to earlier pages, shook his head. "Zephyr," Marcus said finally, "I think there's been some kind of misunderstanding." "What kind of misunderstanding?" "This letter makes it sound like we've been deliberately deceiving you." "That's not what happened at all." Patricia nodded earnestly. "We've had some communication problems, obviously, but the idea that we would intentionally steal from you is just, it's hurtful, honestly." I stared at them both. Even confronted with documented evidence of their crimes, they were still trying to manipulate me. "You opened a credit card in my name without my knowledge or consent," I said calmly. "You used my social security number and forged my signature. You had all the statements sent to your address so I wouldn't discover the fraud. That's not a communication problem. That's identity theft." Marcus held up his hands. "Now hold on. That situation with the credit card, that was Patricia's idea, and it was meant to be temporary. We were going to tell you about it once we got caught up on our bills." Patricia shot him a sharp look. "Marcus, don't throw me under the bus. We both agreed it was the best solution at the time." "The best solution to what?" I asked. "To our temporary cash flow problem," Patricia said. "We didn't want to keep asking you for money directly, so we thought if we could just handle some expenses ourselves for a few months, we could get back on our feet without burdening you further." "By committing identity theft, by borrowing against your credit temporarily," Marcus corrected. "We always intended to pay it back." "With what money? You don't have jobs." Patricia bristled. "I work very hard at the nursing home." "No you don't." I checked. "You've never worked at Sunset Manor. They've never heard of you." The room fell silent. Marcus and Patricia exchanged glances. "You checked up on us," Patricia said, her voice hurt and incredulous. "You investigated your own family." "I investigated people who were stealing from me." "We're not thieves," Marcus said firmly. "We're family members going through a difficult time, who made some poor decisions about how to handle our financial problems." I pulled out my phone and opened the photo album I'd created of their social media posts. "These are your poor decisions," I said, showing them pictures of their vacations, their shopping trips, their expensive dinners. Spa days and golf courses in luxury resorts, all funded with money stolen from me. Patricia's face flushed red. How dare you spy on us like that? What kind of person does that to people who love them? What kind of people steal from someone who loves them? Marcus leaned back in his chair, studied me for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice was different, colder. The warmth and fatherly affection were gone. You know what your problem is, Zephyr. You've never understood what family means. Family means supporting each other through tough times. Family means making sacrifices. You're so concerned with keeping track of every dollar, you've forgotten that relationships matter more than money. You're right, I said. Relationships do matter more than money. That's why your betrayal hurts so much. Betrayal. Patricia laughed bitterly. You think we betrayed you? We welcomed you into our family. We treated you like our own son. We included you in our lives, our problems, our solutions. And the first time things get complicated, you run to lawyers and accountants instead of talking to us like family. I stood up. I'm talking to you now. I'm giving you a chance to make this right before I involve prosecutors. Prosecutors. Marcus's voice rose. You're threatening us with criminal charges. I'm not threatening anything. I'm explaining your options. You can work with me to repay what you've stolen and transfer the car loan to your names, or I can let the district attorney's office handle it. Patricia started crying. I can't believe this is happening. How did we get here? We love you, Zephyr. You're family to us. Doesn't that mean anything? For a moment her tears almost worked, almost made me feel guilty for holding them accountable, almost made me wonder if I was being too harsh. Then I remembered the spreadsheet on my laptop. $18,000 in direct theft, $15,000 in credit card fraud, $1,200 every month in car payments for a vehicle they were treating as their personal luxury transportation. It means everything, I said. That's why this is so devastating. You didn't just steal my money, you stole my trust. You made me believe I was helping family when I was really funding your lifestyle upgrade. Marcus stood up abruptly. I think you should leave. I think you should read the letter again. Carefully. You have 72 hours to decide how you want to handle this, or what, or I file criminal complaints and civil lawsuits on Thursday morning. I walked toward the door, then turned back. One more thing. Don't contact Elena about this. Don't try to get her to intercede on your behalf. Don't involve her in cleaning up your mess. If you drag her into this, I'll make sure the prosecutor knows you're trying to manipulate additional family members. Patricia's tears had stopped. Her face was hard, angry. You'll regret this, Zephyr. Mark my words. You'll regret turning your back on family. I already regret trusting you, I said, and walked out. Driving home, I felt emotionally drained but strategically satisfied. I'd given them fair warning and an opportunity to resolve the situation without criminal prosecution. I'd documented their response, which showed no genuine remorse or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. And I'd made it clear that further attempts to manipulate me or involve Elena would only make their situation worse. That evening, Elena called. I could tell from her voice that her parents had already contacted her. Zeph, what the hell is going on? My parents are saying you're threatening to have them arrested. I confronted them about the identity theft and financial fraud. I gave them an opportunity to make restitution before I involve law enforcement. Identity theft. Are you serious right now? Completely serious. They opened credit accounts in my name without my knowledge, forged my signature, and have been using my credit to fund their lifestyle for months. That doesn't sound like them at all. Elena, I have documented evidence, bank statements, credit reports, forged applications. This isn't a misunderstanding or a disagreement. These are serious crimes. Silence on the other end of the line. Elena, I'm here. I can't believe this is happening. I know it's hard to accept. It was hard for me too. No, Zeph. What's hard to accept is that my husband is threatening to send my parents to prison over money, over felony fraud. Elena, this isn't about money. It's always about money with you. Her voice was getting sharper. Ever since we got married, you've been keeping score, making mental tallies of every favor, and that's not true, isn't it? You've never truly accepted my family. You've always held yourself apart, acted like you were better than us. I felt like I'd been slapped. Elena, your parents committed identity theft. They forged my signature. They stole thousands of dollars from me while lying to my face. How is holding them accountable for crimes the same as thinking I'm better than you? Because family forgives. Family works things out privately. Family doesn't run to the police the first time there's a problem. The first time, Milena, they've been stealing from me for 3 years. This isn't the first problem, it's the culmination of dozens of problems I overlooked because I thought they were family. They are family, or they were, until you decided money was more important than relationships. The conversation continued for another 20 minutes, growing increasingly heated and painful. Elena couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge that her parents had committed serious crimes. In her mind, this was a family financial dispute that should be resolved through forgiveness and understanding, not legal consequences. When she finally hung up, I realized that Marcus and Patricia hadn't just stolen my money, they'd also cost me my marriage. Elena was never going to side with me against her parents, no matter how overwhelming the evidence of their guilt. But that realization, devastating as it was, also clarified my path forward. I no longer needed to worry about preserving family relationships or protecting Elena from the consequences of her parents' actions. I could focus entirely on ensuring that Marcus and Patricia faced appropriate punishment for their crimes. The next morning I called Detective Sarah Chen, the officer who had taken my initial identity theft report. I explained that I'd confronted the suspects and given them an opportunity to make restitution, but that they'd shown no genuine remorse or acknowledgement of wrongdoing. "Are you ready to move forward with pressing charges?" she asked. "Yes, I want them prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. I'll need you to come in and provide additional documentation. Bring copies of everything you have, bank statements, credit reports, text messages, social media posts, anything that shows the pattern of fraud." I spent the entire day at the police station going through my evidence file with Detective Chen and a prosecutor from the district attorney's white-collar crime unit. They were impressed with the comprehensiveness of my documentation and confident that they had strong cases for multiple felony charges. "Identity theft, forgery, financial fraud," the prosecutor said. "We're looking at potential prison time and mandatory restitution. Your evidence package is extremely thorough. When will they be arrested? We'll issue warrants within 48 hours. Given the amount of money involved and the sophistication of the scheme, bail will likely be set fairly high." That evening I sat in my apartment trying to process everything that had happened. In less than a week I'd discovered that my in-laws were criminals, confronted them with evidence of their crimes, ended my marriage and initiated criminal prosecutions that could send them to prison. The rational part of my mind knew I'd made the right choices. Marcus and Patricia had committed serious crimes and shown no genuine remorse when confronted. They deserved to face legal consequences for their actions. But the emotional part of my mind was struggling with the magnitude of what I'd set in motion. These weren't strangers or acquaintances, they were people I'd shared holidays with, people who had hugged me and called me son, people who were married to the woman I loved. My phone rang. Elena's name appeared on the screen. "The police were here," she said without preamble. "They arrested my parents." "I know. How could you do this? How could you send police to our house like we're criminals?" "They are criminals, Elena. They committed identity theft and fraud. They're my parents." Her voice broke. "They're not perfect, but they're not criminals. They made mistakes. Forging someone's signature isn't a mistake. Opening credit accounts in someone else's name isn't a mistake. Systematically stealing money over multiple years isn't a mistake. You could have worked with them to pay you back. You didn't have to destroy their lives. They destroyed their own lives by choosing to commit felonies instead of asking for help honestly." Elena was crying now. "I can't do this anymore, Zeph. I can't be married to someone who would do this to my family." "Then don't be." The words came out harsher than I'd intended, but I didn't take them back. I was exhausted from trying to explain basic concepts of right and wrong to someone who refused to see past her family loyalty. "Fine," Elena said. "I'll file for divorce tomorrow." "Fine." After she hung up, I sat in the silence of my apartment and tried to figure out how I felt. Sad, certainly. Angry, definitely. But also something else, something I hadn't expected. Relief. For 3 years I'd been trying to fit into a family that saw me as a resource rather than a person. I'd been making excuses for people who were exploiting my trust and goodwill. I'd been subsidizing a lifestyle I couldn't afford for people who showed me affection only when they needed something from me. Now all of that was over. The truth was exposed, the criminals were facing justice, and I was free from the obligation to pretend that theft and fraud were acceptable within family relationships. 2 days later I got a call from Detective Chen with an update on the case. Both defendants have been formally charged, she said. Marcus Voss is facing 3 counts of identity theft and 2 counts of financial fraud. Patricia Voss is facing 2 counts of identity theft and 1 count of financial fraud. Their arraignment is scheduled for next Tuesday. What kind of penalties are they looking at? If convicted on all charges, Marcus could face up to 8 years in prison. Patricia could face up to 5 years. Both would be required to pay full restitution plus penalties and interest. Will they actually serve prison time? That depends on several factors. It's their first offense, which works in their favor. But the amount of money involved and the sophistication of the scheme work against them. The prosecutor thinks they'll likely plea bargain to avoid trial, probably serving 18 months to 2 years each. After Detective Chen hung up, I realized I felt no satisfaction from the prospect of Marcus and Patricia going to prison. I wasn't vindictive or cruel. I simply wanted them to face appropriate consequences for their actions and be prevented from victimizing other people. But there was one more element of justice I wanted to pursue. Marcus and Patricia had built their fraudulent lifestyle partly through social media, presenting themselves as successful and prosperous while stealing money to fund their image. I wanted the community to understand the truth about how they'd been living. I created a detailed blog post laying out the entire timeline of their crimes, including copies of key evidence documents. I didn't include their names or identifying information, but anyone who knew them would recognize the details. I submitted the post to several financial crime awareness websites and local news outlets. Within a week, the story had been picked up by a Portland television station and broadcast as part of a series on family financial fraud. The report included interviews with financial experts discussing warning signs of identity theft and resources for victims of family financial abuse. Marcus and Patricia weren't named in the broadcast, but their neighbors and friends would have recognized the BMW, the house, the details of the case. Their carefully constructed image of success and prosperity was publicly revealed as a foundation built on theft and deception. 3 weeks after their arrest, I received a certified letter from their attorney offering to negotiate a plea agreement that would include full restitution in exchange for reduced charges. I forwarded the letter to the prosecutor and told him I supported whatever resolution would ensure full repayment and appropriate punishment. The final resolution came 6 months later. Marcus pleaded guilty to 2 counts of identity theft and was sentenced to 18 months in prison plus 5 years of probation. Patricia pleaded guilty to 1 count of identity theft and was sentenced to 1 year in prison plus 3 years of probation. Both were ordered to pay full restitution of $47,000 plus interest and penalties. The BMW was repossessed and sold, with the proceeds applied to my loan balance. The remaining balance was covered by a combination of seized assets from Marcus and Patricia's house and a court-ordered payment plan that would continue for years after their release from prison. Elena and I finalized our divorce while her parents were still awaiting sentencing. We divided our assets equitably, and she moved back to her parents' house to help manage their legal troubles. We haven't spoken since the divorce was finalized. Looking back on the entire experience, I'm struck by how gradually the deception unfolded and how completely I was manipulated. Marcus and Patricia weren't amateur criminals who stumbled into fraud. They were sophisticated manipulators who had refined their techniques over years of practice. They understood exactly which emotional buttons to push to make me feel guilty for setting boundaries. They knew how to present themselves as loving family members while systematically exploiting my trust and generosity. They were skilled at creating plausible explanations for inconsistencies and deflecting suspicion back onto me when I started asking questions. If I hadn't accidentally discovered the credit card fraud, they probably could have continued their scheme indefinitely. I would have kept making car payments, kept believing their stories about temporary setbacks and consulting businesses, kept thinking I was helping family members who genuinely cared about me. The experience taught me that trust once broken can never be fully repaired. It also taught me that family relationships based on exploitation and deception aren't worth preserving, no matter how much emotional investment you've made in them. But most importantly, it taught me that standing up for yourself isn't cruel or vindictive, even when the people who wronged you try to make you feel guilty for holding them accountable. Sometimes the kindest thing you can do for yourself and others is to ensure that actions have consequences. Today I live in a different city, work for a different company, and have built new relationships based on mutual respect and honest communication. I'm more cautious about financial transactions and more skeptical of sob stories, but I'm not cynical or closed off. Marcus and Patricia taught me to recognize manipulation and exploitation, but they didn't teach me to stop trusting altogether. They taught me to trust more carefully, more selectively, and with better boundaries. And every month when I see the restitution payment hit my bank account, I'm reminded that sometimes justice does prevail, even when it takes longer than you'd like, and cost more than you expected. The money they stole is being repaid, penny by penny, with interest. But the trust they destroyed can never be restored, and in the end that may be the heaviest price they'll ever pay. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.